we have staff members that are like this, but also how easy is it for staff members to also come out and say, I have been a victim, because students are the face of the business. And also, I think with my colleague here, we're also speaking about a number of times we don't report these things because students are innocently crushing on you. They're innocently from a crush to harassment. So how do we look at this face of innocence within the context of this scourge of GBV even within institutions of higher learning? I think that's my question for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the final two questions and then get our panelists to respond. I've noted your hand.
Okay, I'm going to try to be very brief. My name is Palesam Papa from the University of Fort Hare. I'm really happy for this report. I find it very important in terms of driving the collective agenda of gender transformation for higher institutions. It really speaks to and it with the issue of transformation being a political action. There is no way that would aspire and think that we are going to be able to implement policies without putting resources to that. There's a lot of work in terms of gender-based violence. If we are saying we are in a crisis as far as GBV is concerned as a country, it means there's need for, it's mandatory for us to put resources, and hence we are happy at least that in this conference we had our leadership, and we are also hoping that as we continue, we are gonna get to a point where we are going to see it allow us to properly implement. But key for me, it's also the issue of how we address the issues of staff, the gaps, considering the fact that in as much as our Sexual Offences Act amendment talks about the National Sex Offenders Register, and it is still underway, it's quite important that the MTT report picks on the importance of having a high institutions offenders register. That for me is very important, and I would like to just get a sense from you, considering the change of government and all that you talked about when you first started this work. Is there appetite within higher education as they consider this task team very important to put that into place? Because it's one key issue, because a lot of our matters that happen in universities don't go to the criminal courts. So that National Sex Offenders Register is still going to be looking for us to be able to address the issue of safeguarding our vulnerable 25 years of females. Because when you look at where we are, a majority of our populations in universities are students, and mostly females, 25 and below. So that issue of vulnerable group that has been expanded really brings back the necessity of having that register within higher education. Thanks.
Thank you. Over to you.
I've got one over here. Hi. From High Health, Erica Emden again. I wanted to comment on the question of the data collection and the fact that it's so difficult to get the data. And I think it might be worth strategizing about it, and because there is a community of practice and practitioners, possibly in the beginning, maybe it's worth trying to get the data, but handle it confidentially within the university community of practice community before releasing it to the DHET and making it public, because of the sensitivity around data that universities obviously have, not wanting to appear to have high levels of gender-based violence. Because I think it's about the messaging. A lot of it's about, this is what's happening, but it's also how we're dealing with it and how responsive we are and what things we have put in place to deal with GBV. So I think, because I think without the data, we really actually know, are we getting better? Are we dealing with it? Are we actually managing complaints properly? And I think that the data is important, and we actually have no proper data in South Africa of what's going on in gender-based violence at higher education institutions. We don't know what level of rapes there are, what sex for marks cases there are, what harassment cases we have. It's just not available. And without that information, we're in the dark, and it affects our ability to respond.
Sure. Thank you, Erica. The final comment, and before we get the panelists to respond.
Afternoon, everyone. I'll literally take a minute. My interest is what Dr. CK has said about the register. We seem to have a number of registers in South Africa, but we have no data. My question will be then, how are we going to ensure that when we create this register, we will have numbers? Because we have a register for elderly abuse, have a register for sexual offenses. We seem to be working in silos, and I like one of the speakers indicated that we seem to be working in silos when we're fighting gender-based violence. Now, if we're going to create these registers with other registers that are available, how are we going to ensure that we are feeding the data into the system that we already created, rather than creating a register that is not going to have data? So that is basically my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Panelists, we'll start with the Commission for Gender Equality. You can select the questions that you are able to respond to.
All right, thank you so much. I think the first question was regarding upscaling persons with disabilities and in senior positions and what gaps we have identified. Besides the deviation from employment equity plans, we've also identified a gap in the recruitment strategies that institutions provide to the Commission insofar as persons with disabilities. Part of our recommendations, was the fact that when recruiting persons with disabilities, there shouldn't just be the statement that persons with disabilities are encouraged to apply, but there should be a targeted publication of those vacancies so that persons with disabilities are able to apply. There should also be collaboration with organizations that cover persons with disabilities. When advertising these posts, share them with those organizations, publish them in local newspapers where persons with disabilities will be able to see them. So we've made a number of recommendations within this space insofar as the recruitment strategy. We've also recommended that institutions stick to the employment equity plans insofar as the recruitment for persons with disabilities. The other question was ensuring data collection insofar as gender non-conforming individuals and non-binary individuals. When we send our questionnaires and we request disaggregated data, we do leave space for gender non-conforming individuals and the LGBTQI community. However, institutions haven't collected this information. You find that in most of institutions, whether public or private, they don't have this data insofar as the LGBTQIA community, because you'll literally be required to tick, are you male or are you female? And that is an issue that cuts across all organizations, not just institutions of higher learning. So they don't have that data insofar as the workforce information. The other question was regarding inequality in managerial positions and how we are assisting as the Commission. My colleague will cover the issue of recommendations on what recommendations we have covered in terms of this particular issue. But if I can just mention what we normally recommend is that African women and groups that are found to be lacking within this disaggregated data, we encourage institutions to provide training. We encourage institutions to have skills program that will upscale women to managerial positions. We also look at the succession plans and promotion policies. What gaps are there insofar as upscaling women, and we make the necessary recommendations. As I mentioned, the recommendations are unique to each institution, but what we do make sure is that where we found that women are mostly in administrative levels, we encourage training, we encourage skills development, and we then recommend a concerted effort insofar as the policies of that particular institution. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. We really do look forward to hearing more around the recommendations on day 3. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you very much for your questions and your engagement. I think my first question was, Joanna from Limpopo, you asked about what happened to those who didn't submit. Our task as a task team was to gather data in order to inform the minister on how to implement the policy framework. And the minister who called for this was then immediately replaced by another minister. So it was a bit of a tricky environment in which we were working, and we had no power to force people to submit their documents. Those who didn't submit documents, or those who didn't attend the hearings that we set up, were probably those where there were reports of gender-based violence happening. And so that not, but we didn't really have the power to do anything about that. So thanks for that question. Someone, yeah, from the Free State on contra power. You know, I've been looking through my notes and it was a very interesting and important conversation that we had. So, and this is where staff are harassed by students and what can happen about that. I will find it. And if we can talk about it afterwards. I'm so sorry I don't have it, you know, I remember us having the discussion and I remember it going into the document, but I don't remember the details of that. And so I'd really love to take that up with you maybe at lunchtime, if that's okay. I'm sorry about it. I've been looking for it, but I can't. I know it's in here somewhere. You also asked about harassment, how to fill a gap, how to educate students, you know, because in some ways crushing on you and then suddenly it becomes harassment. One of the recommendations that came out of the ministerial task team was the academic project and what needs to happen there. And, you know, there have been many talks in many universities about having a common course where people are taught certain things, but certainly there needs to be a conscientization on campus. People arrive on campus from different understandings, different backgrounds, different ideas about what constitutes harassment or not. And we need to have these conversations on campus, and it is something that needs to be done uniquely on each campus based on what that campus's issues are. So that's all I can suggest for now, is that it does need conscientization. It needs some people who are aware or open to gender issues to include something about that in their curricula from first year until postgrad, so that these things become part of the conversation amongst students. And it's very hard when you're getting comments to be able to address it. What I tell my students is that be very careful of the racism that lets you accept me making mistakes and not a young black woman who makes mistakes. A young black woman has to work so much harder in order to be believed by even black students. And I just warn them, be hard on me, because your mind is already wired to go, oh, but she's white, that's good, you know? And so this institutional racism sometimes prevents young black women, particularly, but other young black LGBTQIA women from having a voice because of the hierarchies that are inherent in our institutions. So it's a conversation worth having. I'm so sorry I can't answer you more fully right now. Someone asked, you asked in the front about the register and what's going to happen with that. Quite a lot of the recommendations that we made came with very clear requirements. And about that register were very clear requirements that started from the minister who needed to do certain things. I suspect that that's why it took such a long time to publish it in the Gazette. It was ready a whole year, I think, before it got published. So I don't know what else we can do, but part of that register does involve accountability everywhere. So HR has to check the register before making an appointment. The register has to be made available in particular ways. How do we police that? How do we make sure it's implemented? I suppose by activism, you know? And if the minister isn't acting on that and isn't developing that register, we have to find other ways to keep putting it in the public imagination. I think that, have I left any, I think that was all that I could see.
Yes, I think we are well covered. We are well covered. Indeed. Thank you so much to our panelists, and I think they do deserve another round of applause. And thank you again to everyone here for your engagements and your contributions. And indeed, these discussions really do matter. But the greater work begins when we go back to our institutions of higher learning. And I want to end this session with a quotation from, which I got from the Vice Chancellor of Rhodes, and he signed it. Signed. And just a part of it reads, "There is only one you in this world. Play your part to leave this world a better world." And this is the inspiration that I want to leave with all of us. Let's play our part. The work of gender transformation, the work of eliminating gender-based violence begins with each and every one of us. And it's going to take collective work, collective efforts. Let's make gender-based violence prevention our business. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Ms. Nonhlanhla Spandamoyo and the panelists whom I'm actually going to allow you to step down. Thank you for engaging with us. And as Nonhlanhla said, there's only one you. You have a huge role to play, and make sure you play it well. With these words, colleagues, we can take our lunch break. My time says 20 minutes to 2, am I right? So then we come back exactly an hour after that. Thank you so much. Let's meet again. It's 20 minutes to 3. Thank you so much, colleagues.